Hey y'all, coming back after a couple of weeks vacation and wanted to get back into talking about churchisms. Now, just a quick reminder, churchism is something that we believe about the church that may be only a half truth or it may be completely false, but we've come to accept it or believe it. And today I'm going to talk to you about something that I think is important. It's worship style. And it's this idea that if we have any kind of demonstrative worship in the church, then we are compromising our doctrine, and we're losing our conservatism or whatever you want to call it. But the reality is that when we look at worship in the Bible, we see that it was very demonstrative. That worship in the Bible involves emotions. It involves standing or kneeling or raising of hands and those kind of things. The problem is there's a couple of problems. The first one is this idea that if we don't do anything but just sit on our hands and cross our arms, then if we do anything other than that, then we're allowing kind of liberal progressive theology to come into our church. It's not true. The other idea is that if we do anything, then that means just anything goes. Well, that's not true either. There is a line, and we've got to determine where the line is. We like to just obliterate the line, so then we don't have to deal with it. And so today, I want to help us to see that it's okay for us to worship God, but in a unique way. But we also need to realize and understand where the focus lies. The first thing is that the focus is on worship. It's not on you. It's not about your feelings. It's not about drawing attention to yourself. It's not about other people seeing how spiritual you are. It's about worship. It's about it's about focusing completely and totally upon God. And anything that draws away from that is not worship. Now, the other thing that we need to remember, especially when we come together as a church, you can do anything you want to in your own private worship. But when we come together, we need to remember that we come together as a corporate body to worship God together. We're not just a bunch of individuals who are worshiping God individually in the same place. We are a family, we're a body. And so not only are we responsible for one another, we're accountable to one another. And so when we read what Paul says to the church at Corinth in 1 Corinthians 14, we see that Paul says, look, we need to understand that we're accountable for the way that we act. And it matters not just to us, but to others around us, and also to those who would come into the church who are not believers, so that they might hear the truth of the gospel and be saved, not merely just see some kind of sideshow that we're putting on. And so I want us to understand that the focus is not on our emotions. The focus is not upon ourselves. And we need to understand that we don't have to be afraid if we look around and we see somebody raising their hands. It's okay. We haven't lost our salvation, and we haven't gone liberal. And just because somebody raises their hands in your church service doesn't mean that we're going to be running up and down the aisles or rolling on the floor or barking like a dog. But but we can demonstratively worship God. Now I want to give you some principles to help this be done, because Paul says in 1 Corinthians 14 that everything ought to be done. It ought to be done seriously, and it ought to be done in order. There shouldn't be chaos in the church service. And so the first principle is focus on God. Focus on God. That means that you are there to worship the Lord. Um, but you need to understand and realize that that means that God is the audience of worship and that you are a participant. And so the focus is on God. Can you really worship God if they sing a song that you don't like? Yes, you can. Can you really worship God if the preacher preaches a dud of a sermon? And it happens, believe me. Yes, you can. Because you are there to worship the Lord, and the focus is upon Him, not upon you. Always remember that. But also remember that you're to never draw attention to yourself. We're not merely individuals who are just taking care of ourselves, but that we are actually a corporate body. And your focus is always supposed to be on the Lord, but your intention is always to make sure that you're never a stumbling block for anybody in the church. If you're drawing attention to yourself, you're drawing attention away from God. You're making yourself an idol rather than allowing people to focus on God. We have some young people in our church. My church may not even realize this because they don't sit where I sit. I sit up and look out on the congregation. But we have some young people in our church who are more demonstrative than others, and yet they're quite mature in their handling of it, because when we sing songs and so forth, and they want to raise their hands or stand when we're sitting or whatever, they don't just do that in front of everyone. They actually go to the back of the church. They go behind everyone, so they're not a distraction to anyone, and they're able to focus on God. Shows a lot of maturity, shows a lot of consideration, and it shows a lot of understanding about what we are there for. We're never there to draw attention to ourselves, and we're never there to distract others from the Lord. Now, I understand you might say, well, their focus ought to be on the Lord too. That's true. They ought to. But you should never be in a place where you're distracting others. And let me just say this about something just as simple as, look, don't get up in the middle of the service and walk out and go to the bathroom. Yeah, I understand if you don't feel well, or your stomach hurts, or you don't feel well or whatever, that's one thing. But have the discipline in the service to say, you know what, I might need to go to the restroom, but you know what? I don't want to be a distraction to anyone. I don't want to take anyone's attention away from what's going on, whether it's the music or the preaching or the invitation or what. I don't want to take anybody's attention away from that. So I'm not going to get up and walk around in the service. You see, we need to understand that corporate worship is just that. We're there for one another, but we're also there primarily to focus on God. And so the focus is not on whether so and so raises their hands, or whether so and so closes their eyes, or whether so and so stands up or sits down, or whether we sing this song or that song. The focus is on the Lord. And the focus is on doing everything that I can to worship Him in spirit and truth in a way that will encourage others and will not distract them from worshiping God in that same way. So is demonstrative worship bad? Absolutely not. But it can be a distraction. And it can be wrongly focused if we don't focus completely and utterly on God. We're supposed to consider one another. We're supposed to encourage one another. We're supposed to edify one another as the body of Christ. And what better place to do that than in worship? So consider your own worship. Are you drawing attention to yourself rather than God? Are you distracting other people's attention away from worshiping God? Or are you just a humble servant? Like the publican saying, Lord, be merciful to me, a sinner, as you cry out to him in worship. You see, when we do that, if we all do that, then our focus is taken off our neighbor. It's taken off the person next to us. It's taken off of what's going on around us. And it's just placed upon God himself. And when that happens, not only are we drawn closer to God, but we're drawn closer to one another as we draw closer to God. Focus on him and allow him to work in you in a way that only he can. God bless you.